Today I am going to demonstrate the cranial nerves, their location, their supply and their function. We know that there is 12 cranial nerve. Among them there is mixed, some are motor and some are sensory. 1 to 8 is sensory, 3, 4, 6, 11, 12 cranial nerve is motor, and 5, 7, 9, 10 is mixed. Before going to detail, here I have drawn a picture of inferior surface of the brain. Here you can see the location of all the cranial nerves. Starting from the first cranial nerve, it arises from the olfactory bulb. These are olfactory bulbs. It arises from the olfactory bulb and then gives supply to the nasal cavity. First cranial nerve is purely sensory and takes part in olfaction. Now second cranial nerve, that is optic nerve. It arises from the lateral geniculate body from here and gives supply to the eye. So it's also pure sensory. It gives sensory supply to the eye. And then the third cranial nerve, that is oculomotor nerve, which is purely motor. It arises from, here you can see, from the midbrain. This one is oculomotor nerve, and it gives supply to the ciliary muscle, sphincter muscle and all external eye muscle except lateral rectus muscle and superior oblique muscle. So oculomotor nerve, third cranial nerve, it arises from the midbrain and gives supply to the ciliary muscle, sphincter pupilla and all external eye muscle except lateral rectus and superior oblique muscle. Fourth cranial nerve, that is trochlear nerve. Trochlear nerve is also purely motor and gives supply to the superior oblique muscle. It arises from the midbrain. Here you can see it arises from the midbrain and gives supply to the superior oblique muscle. So it is purely motor. Then fifth cranial nerve, that is trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve is mixed type of nerve. It has both sensory fiber and motor fiber. It arises from the pons here and it has three divisions. One is ophthalmic, then maxillary, then mandibular. Ophthalmic, maxillary and mandibular. Ophthalmic and maxillary, these two are purely sensory. It carries sensation from the face, sinus and teeth. Mandibular division is mixed. It has both sensory fiber and motor fiber. The sensory fiber also carries sensation from the mandibular part. So all three areas is supplied by sensory fibers. Motor fiber of the mandibular division gives supply to muscle of mastication. So this one is the motor fiber of mandibular division of trigeminal nerve. Mandibular division is mixed. It has both sensory and motor supply. Hence the trigeminal nerve is mixed type of cranial nerve. So trigeminal nerve is mixed nerve. Then number 6 cranial nerve. Number 6 cranial nerve is abducens nerve. It is purely motor and gives supply to the lateral rectus muscle. Here, this one, lateral rectus muscle, and it arises from the pontomedullary junction. So abducens nerve, number 6 nerve, that is purely motor and arises from the pontomedullary junction and gives motor supply to the lateral rectus muscle. Number 7 cranial nerve, that is facial nerve. It is mixed type of cranial nerve. It has both motor supply and sensory supply, and it arises from the pontomedullary junction, lateral to abducens nerve. Here you can see from the pontomedullary junction it arises. It has motor supply to the muscle of facial expression. It has also motor supply to the submandibular gland, sublingual gland and lacrimal gland. So facial nerve has motor supply to the muscle of facial expression and also motor supply to the submandibular, sublingual and lacrimal gland. Then it has got sensory supply the sensory supply. Here you can see sensory supply to the taste sensation, anterior 2/3 of the tongue, and sensory to soft palate. So it gives sensory supply, taste sensation to the anterior 2/3 of the tongue and soft palate. These are the supplies of facial nerve, which is mixed nerve. Then number 8 cranial nerve, that is vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibulocochlear nerve has got two parts, that is vestibular part and cochlear part. It also arises from the pontomedullary junction. Here you can see, and it is purely sensory. It is purely sensory. Vestibular cochlear nerve is purely sensory. Vestibular part is concerned with balance, and cochlear is concerned with hearing. So it is purely sensory. Then cranial nerve, that is glossopharyngeal nerve. You can see this one, this glossopharyngeal nerve. So glossopharyngeal nerve arises from the posterior lateral fissure of medulla. You can see this one is medulla, these are olive, and these are pyramid. The junction of pyramid and olive, this one is anterior lateral fissure, and behind this one is posterior lateral fissure. So from the posterior lateral fissure, the glossopharyngeal nerve arises. Cranial nerve is mixed type of cranial nerve. It has got both sensory and motor supply. The sensory supply is to taste sensation, that is posterior 1/3 of the tongue. It gives taste sensation of the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, and sensory supply to the tonsil, pharynx, and middle ear. These are sensory supply, and the motor supplies are, you can see the motor supplies are motor to stylopharyngeus and parotid gland. So glossopharyngeal nerve gives motor supply to stylopharyngeus muscle and parotid gland. And then 10th cranial nerve, that is vagus nerve. This one, 10th cranial nerve, that is vagus nerve. It is also mixed type of cranial nerve. It arises from the, it is also mixed type of cranial nerve, and it also arises from the posterior lateral fissure of medulla. It also arises from the posterior lateral fissure of the medulla. You can see it also mixed nerve. It has both sensory and motor supply. It gives motor supply to the heart, lungs, palate, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and GI tract. And sensory supply, gives sensory supply to heart, lungs, trachea, bronchi, larynx, pharynx, GI tract, and external ear. So these are the supply of vagus nerve, and it arises from the posterior lateral fissure of medulla. Then 11th cranial nerve. 11th cranial nerve is accessory nerve, which is purely motor. You can see this is purely motor, and it also arises from the posterior lateral fissure of medulla, and gives motor supply to the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscle. So it gives motor supply to the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscle. Then the number 12 cranial nerve, that is hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal nerve, this one, it arises from the anterior lateral fissure of the medulla. This one is anterior lateral fissure of the medulla, and it arises from here and gives motor supply, pure motor supply to the muscles of the tongue. So this one is purely motor. So you can see that I have written the sensory nerves and their supplies with the blue color so that you can understand easily. These are purely sensory. Blue colors indicate the sensory supply, and the red color indicates the motor supply, so that you can differentiate. And the mixed nerves, I have marked them with the pink color. These are all mixed nerves. They have both sensory supply and motor supply. Sensory supply, motor supply, and sensory supply, you can see. So these are all about cranial nerves in a nutshell. Thanks for watching.